I don't expect anyone to believe me. Hell, I barely believe it myself. But I have to tell someone, because if I don't, I might go insane. Maybe I already have. This all started 3 nights ago. I was in town for work, staying at a cheap motel just off the highway. One of those places where the carpets feel sticky, the air smells faintly of mildew, and the front desk clerk looks like he's seen things that keep him awake at night. I should have taken that as a sign. I was in room 109, a single bed, TV bolted to the wall, outdated wallpaper peeling at the corners. It wasn't the worst place I'd ever stayed, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was the strange hum in the air, like an old refrigerator struggling to stay alive. Or maybe it was the door at the end of the hall. I hadn't noticed it when I checked in. But that night, when I went out for a smoke, I saw it. A black door. No number, no sign. Just a plain, matte black door at the very end of the hallway, past all the other rooms. The kind of door that shouldn't be there. And the weirdest part? It had 2 locks. A regular knob and a deadbolt on the outside. Like someone wanted to keep whatever was inside from getting out. I remember standing there for a long time, staring at it. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Eventually, I shook it off and went back to my room. That was the first night. The night I heard the knocking. I woke up to the sound of knocking. Not a loud banging, not frantic pounding, just a steady, deliberate knock. Like someone was testing the door, waiting for an answer. At first, I thought it was my room. I groggily turned over, squinting at the door. The cheap motel lock was still latched, the handle unmoving. But the knocking continued. And then I realized it wasn't coming from my door. It was coming from the black door at the end of the hall. I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest. Something about that sound was wrong. It wasn't just knocking. It was too slow, too patient. Like whoever or whatever was behind that door wasn't in a hurry. I glanced at the clock. 3:12 a.m. I wanted to ignore it. I really did. I tried lying back down, pulling the blanket over my head like a kid afraid of the dark. But the knocking kept going. Knock. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my breath shallow. 5 minutes? 10? It never changed. No voice, no rattling handle, just that same, infuriatingly steady sound. And then, all at once, it stopped. I exhaled, my body tense, waiting for something else. A whisper. Footsteps. Anything. But the hallway outside was dead silent. Eventually, exhaustion won over curiosity. I told myself it was nothing, maybe just some drunk guest messing around. Maybe the wind. I forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I asked the front desk about it. The guy working the counter was older, maybe late 60s, wearing a faded motel polo that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. His name tag said, Bill. I leaned against the counter, trying to sound casual. Hey, that door at the end of the hall. The black one. What's in there? Bill's face changed instantly. His lazy, uninterested expression hardened. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and I saw something there. Not just irritation. Fear. That door's locked for a reason, he said flatly. Forget about it. That should have been the end of it. I should have nodded, walked away, and never thought about it again. But something in his voice made me press further. I heard knocking last night, I said. Around 3 in the morning. His jaw clenched. You heard wrong, he muttered, turning back to his paperwork. Don't bring it up again. Now, I don't consider myself a reckless guy. I've watched enough horror movies to know when to back off. But this felt real. So that night, I did something stupid. I stayed up. I waited. And at 3:12 a.m., the knocking started again. Knock. This time, I didn't stay in bed. I got up. And I opened my door. The hallway was empty. Dim yellow light flickered from a buzzing ceiling fixture, casting long shadows against the peeling wallpaper. The air smelled stale, like old carpet and something faintly metallic. And at the very end of the hall, the black door. The knocking hadn't stopped. Knock. I stood there, my skin crawling, my breath coming out in shallow exhales. This was insane. If someone was in there, if they were trapped, why hadn't the motel staff let them out? I took a cautious step forward. The knocking didn't change. It was as if whatever was on the other side knew I was coming but didn't care. Halfway down the hall, a new sound stopped me in my tracks. A shuffling. Like something dragging across the floor. I froze. The knocking stopped at the exact same moment. Silence. Thick, unnatural silence. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I should have turned around. I should have walked back to my room, locked the door, and never looked down this hall again. Instead, I took another step. And the peephole on the black door went dark. My mouth went dry. Someone or something was standing on the other side. Looking at me. The doorknob rattled. Not a forceful shake. Just testing. Like it wanted to know if the locks would hold. I took a step back. And then. A whisper. Not loud. Not clear. Just a faint, muffled voice, like someone speaking through layers of fabric. Let me out. I turned and bolted. I didn't stop until I was back in my room, door locked, heart pounding in my chest like a jackhammer. I didn't sleep. I sat in bed, my back pressed against the headboard, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. No more knocking. No more whispers. Just silence. And then, at exactly 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text message. From an unknown number. I hesitated, my hands clammy as I picked up the phone. There was no name. No contact info. Just a single, chilling message. Don't open the door. I stared at my phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. Don't open the door. I had never given my number to anyone at the motel. Hell, I hadn't spoken to anyone except the guy at the front desk, and I was pretty damn sure Bill wasn't the type to send cryptic texts in the middle of the night. I typed out a response. Who is this? No reply. I sat there for what felt like hours, every muscle in my body locked in place. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting to hear knocking again. But the hallway was dead silent. At some point, exhaustion won over fear, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, things got weirder. I woke up to a new text message. No number. No contact name. Just 3 words. You're being watched. I shot out of bed so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. My skin felt clammy, my mouth dry as sandpaper. I rushed to the window, yanking back the flimsy motel curtain. Nothing. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few beat-up cars and a truck parked near the office. No sign of anyone lurking outside. I turned to check the peephole on my door. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had smeared something black and greasy over the glass. I couldn't see out. That was enough for me. I threw on my clothes, grabbed my bag, and went straight to the front desk. Bill was there, same as before, sitting behind the counter and flipping through a newspaper like he had all the time in the world. I slammed my key on the counter. I'm checking out. He didn't even look up. Already? Yeah. Already. Bill licked his finger, turned a page. Something scare you? The way he said it flat, uninterested, like he already knew the answer made my stomach twist. What the hell is going on here, man? I demanded. That black door, who's in there? Why did someone text me last night? What's watching me? Bill finally set the newspaper down. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something behind them. Not annoyance. Not fear. Resignation. You saw it, didn't you? He asked. My mouth went dry. Saw what? I whispered. Bill exhaled through his nose, rubbed a hand over his jaw. Then, in a voice so quiet I could barely hear him, he said, You should leave while you still can. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. What does that mean? I asked. But Bill just shook his head, slid my receipt across the counter, and went back to his newspaper. I turned and walked out. I should have left. I should have driven away and never looked back. But as I stepped into the parking lot, I made the mistake of looking back at the motel one last time. And that's when I saw it. The peephole on the black door was no longer dark. Someone or something was watching me leave. I should have gotten in my car and driven away. I should have left that damn motel in the rearview mirror and never thought about it again. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there in the parking lot, staring at the peephole on the black door. It was uncovered now. Something was watching me. My stomach twisted into knots. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. I felt like prey, like a rabbit frozen in place, sensing the predator just out of sight. And then, the peephole blinked. I gasped, stumbling back so fast I nearly tripped over the curb. No. That wasn't possible. Peepholes didn't blink. Eyes blinked. My breathing came fast and shallow. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to shake the image from my mind. When I looked again, the peephole was dark again. I spun around, heart pounding, and forced myself toward my car. I fumbled with my keys, cursing under my breath. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I slid behind the wheel, jammed the key into the ignition, and the rearview mirror. I saw something in the mirror that made my blood run cold. A figure. Standing in the motel hallway. Too far to make out details, but wrong in a way I couldn't explain. It was tall and thin, almost stretched, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It was just standing there, watching me. I slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching as I peeled out of the lot. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get away from that place. But the road had other plans. I must have been driving for 20 minutes before I realized something was wrong. The highway was empty. No cars. No gas stations. No signs. Just endless road. I checked my GPS. No signal. My gut twisted. That didn't make sense. I'd taken this highway before. There were towns along this route. But now, there was nothing. Just miles and miles of empty road stretching into the horizon. I checked my phone again. The screen flickered, glitched. And then, a new text message. No number. No name. Just a single word. Stop. A chill ran down my spine. Stop where? I swallowed hard, scanning the empty road ahead. Then I saw it. Headlights. A car was parked on the side of the highway about 100 yards ahead. Old, beat up. Its hood was up, hazard lights flashing. Someone was standing next to it. A woman. She was waving me down. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to keep driving. But what if she actually needed help? What if? My phone buzzed again. Another message. That's not a person. I slammed on the brakes. My mouth went dry. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I turned back toward the woman. She was closer now. No longer by the car. Standing in the middle of the road. Not moving. Just staring. And then she started walking toward me. Slowly. Deliberately. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I floored it. I hit the gas. The woman or the thing pretending to be a woman didn't run, didn't even flinch. She just kept walking toward me, her head tilting slightly, like she was trying to memorize my face. My car roared forward. I swerved at the last second, avoiding her by inches, and for a split second, as I passed. She smiled. Not a normal smile. Not a human one. Her lips pulled back too far, her teeth too white, too sharp. Her face stretched in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Like a mask tearing at the edges. Then she was gone. I checked the rearview mirror, my heart pounding. The road behind me was empty. No car. No woman. Nothing. Just darkness stretching forever. And then I woke up. I was in a hospital bed. White sheets. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. A dull ache pulsed in my skull. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through my ribs. I groaned. A voice spoke to my left. "Easy there, pal. You're lucky to be alive." I turned my head. A man in a police uniform sat beside my bed, holding a notepad. He looked tired. What happened?" I croaked. The officer exhaled, flipping through his notes. "You were in an accident. Single-car crash, middle of the highway. We found you unconscious, car wrapped around a tree. No other vehicles involved." He paused, studying me. "Do you remember anything?" My brain felt like it was full of static. I tried to piece things together: the motel, the black door, the knocking, the text messages. But it didn't make sense. Had I imagined it? Had I dreamed it all? I licked my lips, my mouth dry as sandpaper. There was a woman. She was in the road. I swerved to avoid her. The officer's face changed. A flicker of something. Not confusion. Not concern. Recognition. I caught it in his eyes, just for a second. Then it was gone. He scribbled something in his notepad. "There was no woman," he said. I swallowed hard. "I saw her. She was. There was no woman." His voice was firmer now. "Just you. Just your car." My head spun. No. That wasn't right. I had seen her. I had the text messages, didn't I? I reached for my phone, which was sitting on the bedside table. My fingers fumbled over the screen, scrolling through my messages. Nothing. The texts were gone. No warnings. No unknown number. No. Don't open the door. Just blank conversation threads. Like they had never existed. I looked up at the officer. He was staring at me now. "You checked into a motel the night before the crash?" he said. "Motel off the highway." "Right." I nodded slowly. He closed his notebook. His jaw tightened. "That motel burned down 20 years ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible. I was there. I spoke to the front desk guy. Bill. The officer shook his head. "Bill was the last owner. He died in the fire. He was the only one in the building when it happened." The room tilted. My stomach churned. "No," I mumbled. A sudden knock made us both jump. 3 slow, deliberate taps on the hospital door. Knock. The officer and I exchanged a glance. He stood up, walking over to the door, his hand resting on his holster. He opened it a crack. And his face went white. I couldn't see who was on the other side. But I heard it. A voice. Faint, muffled, like someone speaking through layers of fabric. "Let me out." The officer slammed the door shut. For a long moment neither of us spoke. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and frantic. Then, slowly, he turned to me. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He looked scared. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. He nodded. "Stay here." He pulled his gun from his holster and cracked the door open again, just enough to peek into the hallway. I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. I tried to sit up, ignoring the pain in my ribs. "What? What do you see?" The officer didn't answer. He stepped out into the hall, gun raised. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in the room. The air felt wrong. I gripped my blanket with white-knuckled fingers, my mind racing. This wasn't possible. I had crashed my car. I should be dead or in a hospital, safe, away from all of this. And yet I could still hear it. The whisper. Faint, coming from the hallway. "Let me out." I swung my legs over the side of the bed, grimacing as pain shot up my side. My body felt real, the cold linoleum under my feet, the sting in my ribs, the floor tugging at my arm. But reality was unraveling. I reached for the call button on the side of the bed, pressing it repeatedly. No answer. The hospital was silent. I glanced at the door. Then at my phone. I hesitated, then picked it up. My fingers trembled as I opened my messages, hoping, praying that everything had gone back to normal. That it had all been a nightmare. There was a new message. Unknown number. I felt ice crawl up my spine as I opened it. It knows you can hear it now. A soft knock on the door made my breath hitch. Knock. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. And then, the handle started turning. Slowly. Deliberately. The door wasn't locked. I scrambled back onto the bed, my pulse hammering as the door creaked open an inch. A single, bloodshot eye stared at me through the crack. And then the whisper came again. Let me out. That eye, wide, bloodshot, unblinking, stared at me through the narrow gap in the door. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Then, slowly, the door creaked open another few inches. The fluorescent light from the hallway barely reached inside, but I could see something standing there. Tall. Wrong. The shape of a person, but distorted like a shadow cast at an unnatural angle. It didn't breathe. It didn't move. And then, in that same muffled whisper like someone speaking from beneath a heavy cloth, it spoke again. Let me out. A cold sweat broke across my skin. My body screamed for me to do something, run, fight, anything, but I was frozen. Then, a gunshot. Bang! The door slammed shut as the gunshot echoed through the hospital. My ears rang. I gasped for breath, my body finally unlocking from its frozen state. The officer's voice shouted from outside. Get away from him! I heard footsteps, heavy boots pounding against the floor. Another gunshot. A loud crash. Then silence. I sat there, gripping the sheets, shaking so hard I thought my bones might snap. Seconds passed. Then a minute. And then, a knock. Not from the door. From behind me. I turned my head in slow motion, my neck stiff with terror. The hospital mirror. A dark shape pressed against the glass from the other side. A pale, skeletal hand touched the surface, leaving a greasy smear. And then, my reflection smiled at me. My reflection's mouth curled into a slow, unnatural smile. I wasn't smiling. My real face was locked in terror, frozen in a silent scream. But in the mirror, the other me was grinning. The lips stretched too wide. The teeth too sharp. And then, without moving its mouth, it spoke. Let me out. I lurched off the bed, my body slamming into the floor stand, yanking the needle from my arm. Pain flared through my skin, but I barely felt it. I was too busy backing away from the thing in the mirror. The glass rippled, like water disturbed by a single drop. The thing wearing my face tilted its head, studying me. And then, it stepped forward. The surface of the mirror bulged outward, like a thin sheet of plastic stretching around something that shouldn't exist. A hand pressed against it from the inside. I turned and ran. The hospital room door banged open before I even reached it. The officer was there, breathing hard, his gun raised. His face was pale, sweat dripping from his brow. We need to go. Now. I didn't argue. I sprinted past him into the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hospital was dark now. No buzzing fluorescent lights. No distant voices of nurses or beeping machines. Just an endless, empty corridor, stretching into the unknown. The officer grabbed my arm, pulling me forward. It's not real. None of this is real. What the hell is happening? I gasped. He didn't answer. We ran. Behind us, the whisper followed. Let me out. I didn't dare look back. We reached the end of the hallway and elevator. The doors were open, waiting for us. The officer shoved me inside, slamming the button for the ground floor. The doors slid shut just as something dark rushed toward us. For a moment, through the narrowing gap, I saw it. A dozen hands, pale and clawed, stretching toward me. And then the doors closed. Silence. The elevator descended. I doubled over, gasping for breath. The officer leaned against the wall, his gun still clenched in a white-knuckled grip. You were never supposed to see it, he muttered. I swallowed hard. See what? He exhaled slowly, then turned to face me. The thing behind the black door. A loud ding echoed through the elevator as the doors slid open, and my stomach dropped. The motel hallway stretched in front of us. Room 109 on my left. And at the end of the hall, the black door. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't possible. I had left this place. I had crashed my car. I had woken up in a hospital. And yet, here I was standing in the motel hallway. The air was thick, heavy, pressing against my skin like damp fabric. The buzzing ceiling light flickered. The officer cursed under his breath. His hand clenched around his gun, but I could see it now. His fingers were trembling. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He was staring straight ahead. At the black door. It looked different now. The two locks on the outside were unlatched. And the door was open just an inch. The space beyond was pitch black, not like a dark room, but like the absence of anything at all. A whisper drifted from within. "Let me out." The officer raised his gun. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You can't let it in. That's what it wants. It doesn't want to escape." He swallowed hard. "It wants to trade places." I took a step back, my legs shaking. "What does that mean?" The officer turned to me, and for the first time, I saw it. The look of defeat in his eyes. "It's how I got here." A cold realization crawled up my spine. I checked into this motel 10 years ago," he whispered. "I heard the knocking. I looked inside. And when I woke up..." His breath hitched. "I wasn't me anymore. I was here. Stuck. And the thing that took my place..." He shook his head. "It walked out wearing my face." The blood drained from my body. I looked at the black door, then back at him. "You're saying It's your turn now." The words sent an icy blade straight through my chest. The officer took a step back, toward the dark room. The whispering grew louder. "Let me out." The thing behind the door was waiting. I shook my head, my entire body trembling. No, there has to be another way." The officer smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had been running for too long. "There isn't." And then, before I could stop him, he stepped backward into the dark. The door slammed shut. The locks snapped into place. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. My vision blurred. I stumbled forward, slamming my fists against the door, screaming. And then I woke up. Back in my car. The morning sun streamed through the windshield. My head throbbed. I was parked just outside the motel. Room 109. I gasped, sitting up, my breath coming in ragged gulps. My phone sat in the cup holder, screen cracked but still on. A notification blinked at me. New message. With shaking hands, I picked it up. It was from an unknown number. "Welcome back." I turned my head. The front desk window was empty. No sign of Bill. The motel looked old. Abandoned. Like it hadn't been used in years. I swallowed hard, heart hammering against my ribs. And then I heard it. Knock. Coming from the black door. I closed my eyes. Because now I knew the truth. The knocking never stops. It just waits for someone new to open the door.